right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is AM 1160 The Quest, Atlanta's Catholic Radio. You're listening to Honest to God. Super excited to be here. Julian, you super excited to be here?
Man, I am. We've had some gremlins that have disrupted things this morning or this afternoon or this evening, whatever time it is.
It's funny that you say gremlins because this episode of Honest to God is brought to you by two people. Both Gail, who I just met a few minutes ago. Not sure how she's involved, but she is.
Gail is great.
Check out Gail.
Gail
great lady. Looks like she does a killer job, like baking, maybe? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, looks like a great lady. And the Twilight Zone movie with John Lithgow where the aliens are on the airplane. Have you seen that?
I have not seen Twilight. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's
no, not Twilight.
Wait.
Twilight Zone.
Oh, pause.
Twilight
Is this all Gales, or is this like one Gale?
No, it's just one lady named Gail. Friend of the show.
My grandma's name's Gail, so that would be really cool. No, like, can we change it?
We don't care about her.
$4. Yeah, listen to Kyle. We're not worried at all about your grandma. Stop bringing her up.
All right, fine.
Just that particular Gail and the Twilight Zone movie. Not the original show, but the movie, John Lithgow on the airplane. You never seen that?
I'm familiar with it.
There's something on the way.
I think I saw it a long time ago. I am familiar with it.
It's excellent.
So you're not talking about Twilight, the teen fun?
No, not the sparkly vampire thing.
Okay.
No.
Maybe one day.
I doubt it though. I'm not a big fan. I got a lot of fun Twilight facts that I'm not going to share because we got mostly veterans and one brand new guest on the show today. We got Kane Brown. We got Madeline. We got Mickey, who's brand new. Check out Mickey. And then we got Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Who's an oldie but a goodie. Like,
oh yeah.
You were here a long time ago and then never again.
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been avoiding it.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
But
I hear
I've been
that.
dragged back. Yeah.
You got a very like a Norm Macdonald-esque. Like,
that's very high praise. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
Norm Macdonald is
Norm
the man.
Macdonald's great. Yeah. Have you watched some of his stand-up? I just binged it the other day.
Everything Norm Macdonald. Yeah, I'm all about Norm Macdonald. Did you guys ever see that? I think it was Michael Knowles who was talking about his relationship that he had with.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
It was super cool. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. Rest in peace. Norm
Every
Macdonald.
year I
pray for his soul.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, but he was like on the road, man. He was really into all the Christian stuff and apologetics and stuff when he died. Yeah.
Very anti the man, if you know what I mean.
I tell the moth joke, which is just one day in the life of Ivan Ilyich, but told from a moth perspective with like a dead-end pickup line. I tell that joke every year to a group of ninth graders, and every year they like groan and are upset with me for wasting 20 minutes of their life. And I love it every year. I laugh.
It's a great one. Yeah,
it is really
Never
good.
let that go.
Yeah. You know the moth joke. You heard the moth joke? I'm not going to do it on air.
No, you shouldn't do it on air. I'm familiar.
Okay, good. Everyone should watch this episode, stream this episode on an alternate account, and while it's streaming the second time, go listen to Norm Macdonald's moth joke. Yeah. We're going to talk about history today. Really excited about that. And I don't even know what the official topic of this episode is, but basically we want to dive into sort of Catholic history of the politically incorrect variety, which is to say the true variety. I want to really dig into the Crusades to start off with, which is why we brought Mickey on, because I just learned. Like, he knows the stuff. I'm pumped for it. But maybe we'll get into some Inquisition stuff. Maybe we'll get into some Galileo controversy and some of those things. But I think a lot of people don't realize how history is on our side, right, throughout the history of the church. And I'm not here to downplay the members of the church who have done bad things, right, immoral things historically. Absolutely, there's some of those. I always argue that one of the best defenses of the Catholic Church is the fact that despite some of the terrible men, terrible bishops and popes we've had, the gates of hell have not prevailed against her, right? But I really want to dig into some of that high-profile stuff. But before we do that, we're going to start with a prayer. Anybody want to volunteer to pray?
Sure.
You're
looking right at me, so might as well.
I'm ready whenever you are.
All right. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, we offer this episode up for you and for all of the history that we are going to be talking about today and all the people we will be talking about. We offer that all up for you. Help us to speak highly of people in the past and what we can learn from them, and also what we can apply that to our day-to-day lives. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
90 with a girl bump.
Yep, girl bump.
Yeah, girl bump gets you 90. Yeah.
Thank you.
How much? Pause. How much is the girl bump?
It's usually 5 to 10.
That's not bad.
Yeah,
It's an unclear number, though.
Yeah, okay. the number of ums brought you down, but the fact that you didn't land with a rote prayer brought you back up.
I thought about that. I was like, I didn't do that purposefully.
Mickey, you've never been on the show before, but I always just like critique everybody's prayers, and I should not do that, but I like it and it's fun.
I mean, you've got to find something to critique that'll really get to them.
Well, today we're going to critique all of your freshman like intro to history classes or your Western civilization classes for the next hour. So I'm excited about that. But first,
that's my favorite thing to do.
Dude, it's the best. But first, we're going to do fun facts. You owe us one. You just owe us 3, Mickey, and you got to do 2. You've earned another one.
What?
Over the last year, you haven't been here.
Oh, okay. I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like Kyle's kind of mysterious too. Like I want to know more
I
about
don't
him.
want to give away my facts.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. So let's start with Kyle.
Oh, shoot. I guess one fun fact, I'm in a musical that's going to be coming out here in March.
Praise God.
What's the
Which is
musical?
pretty cool. It's an original, actually, written by a local community theater magnate. It's called Kansas. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a good family-friendly story of life out west, and things go wrong in some way.
Awesome.
I can't spoil it.
No, don't spoil it.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the other Kansas.
Like the band?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was
So
my
this-
initial was which one is it going to be?
This isn't that. You'd be very disappointed if you came expecting that.
I was a musical theater guy growing up. I did all the shows and all that.
Oh, yeah?
I'm super into it. Yeah, my crowning achievement was I was LeFou in Beauty and the Beast.
Oh.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm proud of that. I was significantly larger than the guy who played Gaston, though, so I had to like crouch over.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to be actually doing Beauty and the Beast in the summer. So you
Cool.
could reprise your role.
Let me know. I think I still
Yeah.
remember all the words to "No one fights like Gaston." Yeah, so
Yeah, there you go.
we're doing the show for our high school play this year at the school where I work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you worked at a school.
Super pumped. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Believe it or not, it's hard to believe. This isn't actually my full-time gig. I am in this solely for the money. Make a ton of money for this show, right? I flew in this morning just for this episode. But
You got to
to
give back.
give back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
I do some work at a local high school.
You grace the children with your presence. Yeah.
Do you have another one? I won't actually put you on the spot if you don't have another fun fact, but we'd love to hear something from Mysterious Kyle.
I do Muay Thai. That's another thing I do.
Muay Thai. That's a
Muay
lot of
Thai.
elbows and knees, right?
A lot of elbows and knees, yeah. And kicking just all the time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
And if you're one of our Patreon supporters, after this episode of Honest to God, we are going to watch Kyle use Muay Thai to beat up the guy who's hanging out in front of the Quick Trip earlier.
Now, I would challenge any of the listeners to challenge me to a fight.
Yeah,
I will
please
fight
comment.
anyone.
If we get enough
honest to
subscribers,
God.
I'm not going to specify how much. He may fight Gail, actually, the sponsor for this.
Oh no, I don't want to fight Gail.
No, look,
You might be mean, Kyle. You don't know.
She'll pull something out. Yeah.
Kyle, we know you agreed to that earlier, and we won't specify how many, but if you could subscribe,
If we get that
would
much.
be great.
Yeah, don't be humble, Kyle. I think you can take her. I really do.
Yeah, but she's such a nice lady.
That's what you think, Kyle. You'll see.
That's a
Gail
good
came
point.
prepared to fight. That's why she's here. That's why she sponsored the episode.
She's ready. She's watching as we stream this live. The Patreon supporters want to see it. So.
Just the room slowly fills with poisonous gas.
Well, so make sure you stay tuned after this episode. We don't have a Patreon, but maybe make one.
Maybe make one.
All right, Mickey, what you got? 3 fun facts for us.
Let's see. I do a lot of making things with my hands. I've made like rosaries, jewelry. I've done calligraphy and bookbinding. I do some like baking and cooking and sewing.
These are too many fun facts that you're machine gunning us with.
Well,
Mickey.
that's just one. That I make stuff.
Good. Okay, cool. I like that. I like that a lot.
Like even as far as making stuff, I'm working on making a medieval. Do you know a Book of Hours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Bookbinding is a really cool hobby
Yeah.
to have. I think that's super.
Well, that
neat.
one I'm not binding myself because it's going to be so large. I don't have that much supplies.
Right.
But I've got like a nice old leather journal that it has like a clasp that latches.
Awesome.
Oh.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm using as my source for things. I've got like 10 PDFs on my phone from libraries that had scanned in like medieval French Book of Hours. So like 14th century Book of Hours from Paris and Reims, France.
Do you speak French? Are they in the original French? I assume?
The rubrics are usually in French, but obviously the Psalms and stuff are in Latin.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Do you have like a big old Gutenberg press that you use?
No, but I could probably build one.
Oh, that'd be great.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'll be on the next
forever.
episode of Honest to God here on the Quest Atlantis Catholic Radio. All right, what else you got, Mickey? That's awesome.
Alrighty. Second, let's see. Well, I've lived for a while in both Cuba and Puerto Rico.
No way, in Cuba.
Yeah. Havana.
Right. What's that story? How'd you end up in Cuba?
So my parents were Baptist missionaries, and that's where they went.
No way.
So Havana for like the younger part of my childhood, and then since I was like 12, they moved down to Puerto Rico, and I lived in Aguada, Aguadilla, Mocha.
Right. I have a slight bone to pick, not with your parents in particular, but with Protestants who go to evangelize already Catholic countries.
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Like we already did it.
That's what happened. So like the conquistadors show up and cut through a rainforest and topple pyramids and kill the pagan blood demon worshipping priests there, and then build churches. And then when they have AC and asphalt, the Pentecostals roll in and they do it. So.
It's okay. God got the last laugh because I'm Catholic.
There you go. Exactly. Awesome, Mickey.
My parents do not like that.
That's like minus one
conversion
win.
story with Mickey.
You got it wrong. You see, the Protestants, they go down there as the CIA, but they say that they're Protestant missionaries, but they're actually CIA. Especially if you went to Havana, Cuba. Come on, I've never met anybody that's been there.
That's fair. I know one person ever who's like been to Cuba like regularly.
Were they CIA?
Yeah, they were 100% CIA.
Called it.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you tell us their name?
Do you have one more? Because this has been probably one of the best sets of fun facts I've ever gotten, except for the girl who wore her socks inside out.
Okay, let's
You remember
see.
her? You were on that show.
Oh, okay. For my last one, no cap. There was somebody who was there was this lady who was discerning a convent, and after meeting me, she actually discerned out like maybe I'll give this marriage route a try.
No way. That's cool.
Nice.
That's
Wait.
really cool.
Why? Like,
Because she met me.
Because she saw saw what a stud this guy.
okay.
No, that's literally she said that.
That's cool. That's
that's
really cool. It was the book binding. They got it. Yeah.
I was confused if like you just had like a conversation with her, or was just like you're just
No, it was
Just talked her out of it.
you just looked at her like
You really don't have it in you, yeah.
That's awesome. What you got, Madeline? You just tell us one.
I don't really have any. I don't.
I'm sick of you trying to get out of this, Madeline.
I don't.
Every
I've
time
run out.
you do this.
There's. I've already said all the interesting things about my
Doesn't have to be
life.
about you. It can be about anything.
Okay, this
Capital
may
of
be
Azerbaijan is Baku. There's
this
your
may
fun
be
fact.
real or not. I don't know. Maybe fact check me on this, but I think it's tortoises can breathe out of their butt or something like that.
I've heard that
I believe
about
so,
it,
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
I think
So-
it's turtles.
Turtles.
Yeah.
Turtles can. Turtles can breathe out of their
Taxonomically
butts.
different than tortoises, but okay. I'll take
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Kane.
Well, I guess I have two because I have one like really cool one.
Okay.
Seagulls actually cannot fart. So if you give them,
I've heard that.
if you give them like a, I don't know, like a something.
Coca-Cola?
Or like a
I don't know, something. They like will
What's the
actually
thing,
like
Diet Coke?
they will like
Yeah. Mentos.
Mentos.
yes, they will like
okay.
actually explode and like they won't like
Hey, don't do that. We're against
yeah,
that here on
don't
God.
do that. Don't do that. Anyway, my fun fact is not as cool. I probably wore the same tie-dye shirt from the age of 5 to 7, and
Never
it was
took it off?
it was Ron John.
Yeah.
Probably wore it till it literally fell off my body. But I'm a big tie-dye guy, so I mean I was, but you can get me back into it.
What would be cool is if you took off your sweater and you were wearing a Ron John tie-dye shirt that was way too
The
small.
same one.
Yeah, that'd be neat. All right, so I want to talk about Havana, Cuba. I want to talk about bookbinding. I want to talk about Ron John tie-dye shirts, but there's just not enough hours in the day, so we got to move on, and we got to talk about history.
We do have to move on, but I actually have a public service announcement. So
Go
I don't
for
have
it.
a fun fact today, but if you are going to be praying while you're driving, please do not close your eyes, because we are having a lot of accidents out there while we're praying with honest to God, and people are listening.
Honest
and
to
we're
God,
saying a
massive
prayer,
liability.
and people are closing their eyes and getting into car accidents. So please pull over or just keep your eyes on the road.
Talk to God. Don't meet him. Not that soon.
Not
You're
that
allowed to
soon.
pray with your eyes open.
Yes,
allowed.
that's allowed.
I say Jesus take the wheel. I say he's got me. You know?
Kyle is pro pray with your eyes closed while
Yeah.
on the highway. It's cruise control for a reason, right? We've got that in our cars.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Good
We do have
advantage.
auto drive nowadays, but also pray for Kyle since he's closing his eyes with that.
Yes.
All right, guys, I'd love to get into history now. And once again, I don't have a whole lot of prep work for this episode. I've taught history, predominantly ancient history, for the past 5 years. And before that, I taught some world history. I got into some medieval stuff. I really like the ancients. And that's frustrating for an episode like this because by the time the church gets actually legalized, right, Edict of Milan, right, Constantine the First, all of a sudden, like I'm almost at the end of my knowledge base. And so I want to move forward and talk about, I guess, big picture historical misconceptions about the Catholic Church. But it sounds like from our brief pre-show conversation, I want to kind of jump ahead a little bit and start with the Crusades.
Well, we
doing
can
that?
actually start a little earlier than that while still
Please.
talking about the Crusades, because as somebody who knows ancient history, you know that a lot of what by the time of the Crusades was considered the Muslim lands outside of Christendom was actually historically vibrant centers of Christianity.
Right.
North Africa especially. I mean, that's Saint Augustine.
Yeah, Anatolia.
Yeah.
Fun fact, on the back of my pickup truck, I think you got here before I did, so you probably didn't see it. But when you walk out, look on the back of the F-150 out there, and I've got a big red sticker in white lettering that says, "Make Istanbul Constantinople again."
Yes.
No.
Yes. That came a little later though.
Yeah, no, it did. I've got a lot of grudges from 1453 that we don't have to get into right now. So can we dive into that? You're right. That's a good jumping off point to say that what we now consider sort of the lands of Islam, Dar al-Islam over there, North Africa, what we consider the Middle East, really outside of the Arabian Peninsula, up through Anatolia, over past Armenia, right, was Christian, was Catholic for hundreds of years. What is it? The 630s when we have Muhammad first showing up in like Medina?
That sounds like a good ballpark.
Around there, mid 17th century. And from there it expands into these areas that had been Christians for centuries and centuries.
I mean, Cairo.
Right. Huge Christian hub. Antioch. You've got all these great saints and martyrs from there. And so I would love to use that sort of as a jumping off point and say, what then happens? We have Islam conquer Christianity. There's so much we could spend days talking about this. So I'm sort of trying to do it episodic and jump ahead a little bit. But can anybody give us a real quick walkthrough of Urban II? There's a crisis. Why are we doing this?
Well, with the Urban II crisis, that actually comes at the request of the both the Byzantine Emperor in a delegation that was accompanied by the Patriarch of Constantinople.
Right.
They were requesting help with because obviously Islam was still expanding further into Christendom, and it was them who was at the border, so they were having all that fighting. And actually, the thing is that these crusades were at first very much thought of by at least Rome and the emperor as a way to maybe possibly start bridging the schism that
Which
had
had
only
just
just happened.
Right. What was it, 1053? Is it 1053 that we
sounds
have
right, yeah.
the schism between the Orthodox and the Catholics?
Yeah.
So literally, 50 years before, less than that?
Yeah.
Right? And so is this... I feel like modernity, because this is how I learned about the Crusades, growing up in a very conservative area too, right? That the Crusades were big, mean, angry Catholics going and conquering for the sake of, I don't know, some weird Marxist, right, bourgeois purpose. And that's how I learned it as a kid. And if I'm being honest, I think as someone who sort of reverted/converted to Catholicism later in my teenage years, something I really appreciated about the church was these like big manly feats, these things like the Crusades that we were criticized for, because I thought that was weird and contrarian, and that really spoke to my 16-year-old heart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and another thing is that the Crusades, some people will say they were born out of like a people wanted like wealth, which in the medieval times that takes the form of land. But the thing is that most crusaders returned home without having any land in the Middle East after the Crusades. I think there was one scholar who put the figure at like for every 12,000 crusaders, 10,000 went home and only 2,000 stayed, and most of those were parts of like religious orders. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and the number of kings and lords who bankrupted themselves on purpose to finance their war chests for the sake of crusades.
Or like another thing is that lots of people will say it was like, oh, it's the second sons and the third sons, but
that's more the Marxist interpretation that I've heard.
I know,
times.
But it's like no, most of them were firstborn sons, or even more of them were actual reigning nobility.
Right. So can we talk about the why of the Crusades? Can we talk about why that happened? I mean, once again, there was a request for help from Alexius, I think, the emperor of Byzantium. But what was going on in the world? We have Muslim conquest of Christian territory, but can we dig in a little bit more into why Alexius, this Eastern Roman emperor, is asking for help from the Catholic West that the Orthodox East had just had a schism with? Well,
again, it was with Alexius in particular. The big thing was that Islam was encroaching further and further into specifically his corner of Christendom. Like that. They were conquering his land, so it's like help a brother in Christ.
Right.
But and a lot of the motivation with the Europeans who responded to Urban's call for the Crusades was that at that time in medieval France specifically, there was a massive devotion to Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. Right. Pilgrimages were very, very revered at that time, especially to the Holy Land. And this is coming off of a series of events where we've got reports of Christian pilgrim caravans being plundered in the Islamic territories.
Well, I want to make sure that I drill down on that. I just finished, not even in preparation for this, but I want to give a shout out to this book. It's called Defenders of the West, that I'm in the middle of right now. And he really drills down into the why of a lot of these. And it's not all crusades. Some of it is El Cid. Some of it is Don Juan of Austria, right? Yeah. But he really drills down to the why this stuff was happening. And most of the sources he uses are from Muslim sources. Yes. Right? Mm. And they're sort of victory songs of the slaughtering of these caravans and the assaults of these convents of nuns. And I mean, really stomach turning kind of stuff.
And I think that's really interesting, because I'm actually currently in a history class, and the way that they present history in general, but especially this time of like, Muslim expansion it was like, the way that they converted people was like, oh, you're a slave, just like convert to Islam, and then everyone's like kumbayaing, what I'm saying? Like they really shy away from like the reality of it's like the jihad, right? And like that's the call to I'm not like incredibly familiar with it, but like it's a lot more like, I think history in general is a lot more gray, but like the way that at least that we're being taught right now is very like oh, they just like peacefully went in and when like took over like the bad guys and like freed the slaves and like this, but history is usually a lot more gruesome and different than you learn in school, so it's interesting that you talk about that.
What's bizarre to me though is, as far as I know, we're the first civilization, we being the West, the first civilization in history to actively demonize our own history when we teach it to our children, which I think is bizarre. I mean, I would be much less bothered if we were doing like once again, every other civilization I'm aware of, sort of glossing over our own, our own missteps and immoral actions, right? To say, well, we're going to excuse those for these reasons because we did it. And that's not good. I'm not saying it's good to gloss over, right, the tragedies caused by your own people or your own civilization. But I'm saying it is bizarre that we've taken this collective anti-Western sentiment in the West.
Well, I mean, it started off, it's basically a anti-Christian sentiment, but as societies become more secularized, it got redirected to just the West.
Right. Yeah, and the idea of it being sort of, what's funny to me is I'll hear a lot of people who will talk about early Christendom. And by early Christendom, I mean the first 1,000 years or so of Christendom, which was inherently, inseparably Catholic, right?
Yep.
Because we were it, right?
And it was
Until-
inherently and inseparably Middle Eastern.
That's what I was about to say. And somehow tie this to modern race theory when the vast majority of Christians were not in Europe was the backwater,
Yes.
right? Compared to the Middle East, compared to North
and
Africa.
like two of the earliest countries to officially convert before the Roman Empire did were Armenia and Ethiopia.
Right. Inherently non-white countries. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, you know, with this also the narrative that's out there about like the different, you know, between like all the different races, like during the time of the expansion of Christianity, even during the time of these crusades, like it wasn't races, it was peoples,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? And like just the you know, the revolutionary effects of like even Paul going to the Greeks, or Jesus going, and you know, even the reading today was like about like Tyre, and about like him going to a Greek woman, and that was unthought of, and like him going to Samaria. So like
Thomas going to India.
I mean,
Sorry, like, yeah.
I mean, the fact that Christianity, and then you even talk about, you know, in 1537, you talk about, and this was revolutionary at the time, like the Pope literally saying that, like, it sounds like barbaric today, but like that the, you know, giving this proclamation that the people in the New World were still, you know, like they're still able to be, because they're aliens to these people,
Right.
and they're still able to be brought into the covenant, and they're still able to be evangelized, and they still have the dignity and worth that Europeans have, and like that was absolutely revolutionary. And it's just, Christianity has done it time and time and time again, and I don't want to, you know, end this here obviously, but like in every, you know, you go back to the Crusades, you go back to Jesus's time, you go back to, you know, all these different times. It's like the church has led the way
Yes.
in accepting people and accepting all people, all races. It doesn't matter.
No, I think it's beautiful. And I think it's antithetical to sort of the modernist lens with which we, being the West, are supposed to view history. We're kind of all over the place. I was just saying a second ago when we were off air, this is such a huge topic. We're going to do 47,000 episodes on Catholic historical misconceptions and walking through this. We could easily do an episode here on just the First Crusade, or just the Second Crusade, or just the Galileo controversy, or what have you. I want to real quick here at the beginning of this segment get into resources. If
Yes.
I'm listening and I have my natural, virtuous, righteous desire for truth, and I realize that what I'm hearing 90% of the time from the talking heads on whatever historical, whatever, Netflix documentary, or what Wikipedia article, or what have you, I understand that it is biased and modernist, right? What are some good resources that I can find? I mentioned at the beginning, Defenders of the West, which I think is fantastic. The guy who wrote that, I don't know his name, Ibrahim something, I believe. He's a Coptic Egyptian guy. He's written a number of other books extolling sort of these Catholic heroes. But what else is out there?
Well, one is a big just first glance overview of the Crusades would be The Glory of the Crusades by Steve Weidenkampf.
Awesome. We're going to put all these in the show notes.
Yes.
So, yeah.
You've got a lot of things history related. You could read Hilaire Belloc, and some of the ones that are relevant to this in particular, he has a book called The Crusades. There's The Great Heresies of History by Hilaire Belloc, and there's The French Revolution by Hilaire Belloc.
Oh, that's another whole episode on how the French Revolution is one of the worst events that ever happened in
And then there's
civilization.
the war in the Vendée, where there was a Catholic counter-revolution.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to dig in all the, and I will say, and we can't obviously put all these in the show notes, primary resources in general,
Well,
right,
yeah.
from the time period.
And a good primary resource to read about somebody who actually went on crusades is the memoir of King Louis of France, also known as Saint Louis, is the full title, and that's by Jean de Joinville.
And he was Second Crusade.
I don't
Is that
believe
right?
second. No,
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought
it
that
was
you said
after the
before.
fourth.
After one of those other
Oh.
the rest Crusades. That
Yes,
happened
I
later on.
believe.
They call it overtime.
I believe, if I'm, don't quote me on this, but I believe Saint Louis participated in the 6th and the 7th. The 7th was the one on which he died of dysentery.
Not the best way to die.
No.
So I want to get into some of this because you guys, and I thought it was Second Crusade. I was trying to tee that up for that fun fast fact you gave us a second ago. I would love, and it doesn't have to be Crusade specific, but just sort of church history fast facts, especially about some of these more controversial, the more controversial topics regarding church history, right? One thing that I'm always sharing with the kids at my school is I bring up Copernicus and talk about how Copernicus believed pretty much exactly what Galileo did before Galileo did, and was like in the running to be a bishop at one point.
Yep.
The difference is that he didn't make fun of the Pope and write a story where the Pope was called Simplico, right? Simpleton.
And I mean, another fun thing about Galileo is that while he had the right concept, as it was eventually shown, his math was actually very off. You couldn't use it accurately to chart the stars. That's why for so long, people, even if they thought maybe we live in a heliocentric solar system, they used the Ptolemaic system because it had accurate math for charting stars.
Right. Yeah, get wrecked, Galileo. We're glad that you were put under extremely lenient house arrest. It wasn't that big of a deal.
It wasn't. But Copernicus was actually a lot closer in the math, and it wasn't later till the math got refined for a heliocentric view. Because from the practicality standpoint, if you can't tell when an eclipse is going to be,
right,
what's the...
Well, we're going to go on record right now and honest to God. Copernicus was also better looking. He also looked better. He smelled better. Galileo, had BO,
clean
and
shaven.
was ugly.
Yeah.
So that's a fact. Quote me in the future when you recover this hard drive somewhere.
And Mickey, I just want to, because we're kind of trying to obviously cover a incredibly long time period as far as, but one of the things that I feel like, and I want to pick your brain on, in my history class, it's brought up a lot to say, like, against the church is the Inquisition. And, I feel like that's a very, like, a thorn in the side of a lot of Catholic arguments. And I just want, if you could get into that, that would be awesome.
Okay. Well, a lot of people misunderstand the function of the Inquisition because, see, we're talking about a time in history where the rulers of the lands actually took faith very seriously, and they knew that they were accountable to God for how they ruled their people. They wanted to produce an environment that was good, not just corporeally, but spiritually for their subjects. So heresy was actually a crime punishable by the state. The thing is that you don't just want secular authorities being the one who judge if something's heresy or not. So this is during the time of the Albigensians, a heresy that sprung up in the borderlands between France and Spain. And it was a Gnostic heresy. And the Inquisition was actually started in response to that. Basically, what they did is they just served as they were clerics from the Vatican who could just judge whether a person was obstinately professing was or wasn't heresy. And then they had no power to put any penalty on them. That was the state. It's just the state then wasn't the one saying this is heresy. It was the official position of the church whether or not something was heresy.
And what about the numbers? I mean, you guys can both speak to this. Like, I've heard like thousands and thousands of people like died in result of this. I've been, when people have asked me about this is why I really want to get into it, is like, I just don't even have an answer because I'm not knowledgeable on it. But what are in regards to like the scale of carnage, I guess?
Okay. So number of people killed by the actual Inquisition, 0, because they had no power to levy any penalties on anybody. As far as numbers of people who were executed after after the Inquisition had judged them heretics by the state that was prosecuting them, numbers vary, but it's almost ubiquitously less than 1,000.
And it also seems like there was like a due process like with this.
They invented due process.
Right. Yeah. No, I've heard that because, you know, a lot of the times it's like, you know, if you're against the church, you're gone, you know, but there was like a methodical process to this.
And then it was also very in accordance with canon law. If somebody just speaks a heresy, that's not the crime. It's obstinately teaching and professing the heresy that is.
I'm always saying to my high school students when they'll say something heretical, I'll say, you're a material heretic, repent or become a formal heretic. Right?
Yes.
And that's the idea, is like, hey, you realize what you said was wrong? Because it's cool. If you realize what was wrong, you just got to just like take it back.
No, I mean, the part of the process, a lot of it was like they had to first find out what it was the person was actually speaking, that people weren't always honest about that. But after that, there was a process of like almost conversation and dialogue where they tried to steer the person away from that. And if the person recanted, they wouldn't give the guilty verdict to the state that was prosecuting them.
Yeah. And I know like and this is another thing, I don't know if you're knowledgeable on this, but as far as like the separation between church and state and, you know, the French Revolution and a lot of like the kind of the hairiness as far as that goes, do you have anything as far, you know?
It's a product of the Enlightenment, and it is not a good thing.
The endarkenment, the false enlightenment. Sorry, that's another whole episode. I can go off on my issues. I can go off on my issues with just titles that the Anglo-Protestant sphere have put on Catholic historical events.
And I mean, you know, a lot of the downfall of the medieval governance came about after the Enlightenment, not just from people embracing Enlightenment ideals, but that's actually where we get not the authentic Catholic ideals, but reactionary ideals like absolutism, all that stuff, which did eventually incite, in some ways, the other direction, like the revolutions. You know, I mean, a medieval monarchy looks very different from a monarchy that's reactionary after the Enlightenment.
And I think also, you know, the picture that people try to paint as far as the Enlightenment goes is like the church was just like, you know, knew absolutely nothing about science and knew nothing about like you know what I'm saying? They just wanted them to live in like their peasant homes with their farms and their family, which honestly wouldn't be too bad, you know, it wouldn't be that bad.
Well, I mean, the churches actually invented universities in the West. They actually started off as essentially international branches of cathedral schools, and they were made to train clerics, people going into the legal profession, and any kind of scholarly work like that. That's where universities come from. And also the Catholic Church, through its scribes and stuff, preserved a lot of classical antiquity knowledge, works of Aristotle and Plato, philosophy, sciences.
Well, I'm yet to hear an attack on the Catholic Church in regards to science, because you'll hear sort of the general idea that, the Catholic Church is anti-science, but I'm yet to hear anyone bring up a single example other than Galileo, which is obviously nonsense, right? And it's one of those where if you know just a little bit, I mean,
yes.
I would say a plurality of the great scientists in Western history are either clergy or devout Catholics.
I mean, the guy who first proposed the Big Bang Theory was a priest.
Right, and they didn't like it because they thought it was too theistic. Modern genetics, right? Isn't that, don't we get that from a priest as well? I mean, even Stephen Hawking was on a pontifical council in the 2000s. It's neat stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, like so much knowledge from the ancient world that would have otherwise been lost was preserved. Even things that wasn't explicitly Christian knowledge, like classical antiquity philosophers. Especially there was a big, during the early Middle Ages, there was a big scribal industry in preservation of those documents in the monasteries of Ireland.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to hear from Madeline and from Kyle, because we brought you on here because you're an expert, Madeline. And no, but seriously, this has become, I think, for better, right? A lot of question and answers with Mickey. And no, I think that's wonderful because you're super knowledgeable. I'm loving this.
Yeah, I'm just sitting back.
And I would love to hear questions or thoughts or anything that you might have. You don't have to have the answer, but I'm saying what's going on in your head from your upbringing, from your understanding of the history of Western civilization and its relationship with the Catholic Church. Do you have any big questions? Do you have any big things you'd like to dig into that our resident honest to God expert Mickey might be able to dive into a little bit?
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. I am in no means history. I don't know anything about it.
I didn't know she was going to be on the show until like 5 minutes before we went
But I
on.
mean, that's why she's perfect for asking questions
exactly.
the audience might be asking.
Okay, so one thing I was like trying to retain everything that you're saying. I was like, I should have brought like a pencil and notepad or something to be writing notes down. But like, what is like when you're talking about like I'm hearing like saints' names and stuff like that, and like Copernicus and like all of them, and like when they're creating stuff, like what time period is that? Like when?
Okay, so
is that? So it's like kind of so people can like engage.
Question.
Yeah,
that was great. That's right here.
So with classical antiquity, which encompasses the earliest parts of Christianity, that's going to be the first few hundred years up until a lot of people extend it to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. After that, you've got the early Middle Ages, formerly called by like Victorian era historians the Dark Ages, but not so dark after all.
Right.
But the early Middle Ages, that's when you have people like Charlemagne, who actually kickstarted Christendom and gave rise to all of the major monarchical dynasties in Europe, at least indirectly. And that's the early Middle Ages. Then you've got the High Middle Ages, which come in the middle. That's where you're looking more at, do you know the Pax Christi movement and all that? Okay, so that was a period of time when, so there was still a lot of border and territory disputes among fellow Christians because there was a lot of chaos in the wake of the various successors of Charlemagne. And so a lot of borders could get hazy. And this was a time where, and there was a lot of localism. So the thing is that a decision that could be made at the city level was made at the city level. It's a decision that could be made at the county level, county, duchy level, duchy. So there was a lot of, you'd have like squabbling between cities or squabbling between counts or dukes. And so in order to try to put a dampening on all these inter-Christian conflicts, there was a movement called the Pax Christi. It was started out of what was the name of that abbey in France?
Oh, I don't know. You're getting outside. Like I said, my base of good knowledge extends through about 470.
Okay, well there was Cluny Abbey. Cluny Abbey in France, and it introduced some of the things that you find in the Middle Ages, like certain days of the week you couldn't have you couldn't be waging war, certain seasons.
Eventually, there's only like 5 dozen days or something.
Well, I mean that's why even until into the early modern era, you've got things like people have like a spring campaign,
right,
and a winter or a fall campaign, but they don't fight during the winter and the. So, yeah.
You'll hear campaigning season when it was time to go march on.
Yes, like it's
pesky
a sport.
Burgundians or whoever, right?
Yeah, and then it's actually after that actually a lot of those movements paved the way for a peace within Christendom that allowed the Crusades to develop, which came about at the end of the High Middle Ages. About 11th century is when you have the proclamations. Things didn't really get kick-started till the early 12th century. And then you've got the late Middle Ages, which goes on until people think the Middle Ages go on for longer than they did. Really, most people, like most historians, for just general world history or for European history as a whole, will put the end of the Middle Ages somewhere between 1450 and 1500.
Right.
So 1500, like even something like Martin Luther, that was actually early modern era.
Right.
Yeah.
1517, we just celebrated, in air quotes, the 500th anniversary of the 95 Theses. Fun fact, when I was teaching Holy Spirit Prep, I had a student who wrote a rap called 95 Theses about the 95 Theses. So we won't get into that right now, but it was interesting.
Yeah, so that's so a lot of things people think of as medieval might actually be early modern. And a lot of things people think of as like early modern happen to actually be medieval. Like, you know that early firearms, before even the invention of the matchlock system, were used and got fairly popular for hunting in France in the, I want to say, 14th century.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Yes, and they were used fairly extensively in the 100 Years' War.
Right.
And but something like, you know, it's called a panoply, a full suit of plate armor that's built to be a suit of plate armor, right? That was not invented until the early modern era,
Right.
really late 1400s, 1500s. The two first patterns you see coming out of that is the Italian white armor and the German Gothic armor. And so, yeah, that's where that came from.
I just feel like we have such a, just sort of a, I don't know, a dearth of knowledge about history in general. And I like history. I enjoy history. I've taught history for years in the middle and high school level, right? And I always really, I liked it a whole lot. But it was history that converted me to the faith. Right? It was history that made me Catholic, because as I became increasingly interested in Christianity, I was looking, I wanted to read about early Christianity. I wanted to read about the early church fathers, and I got really deep into it. And eventually I realized, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be Catholic if I keep reading all of this stuff. But it took a whole lot of, like I said earlier in the episode, digging into primary resources. Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about like why that is. Why are we so colored against our history right now? Because I assume growing up and going to school, you were hearing pretty anti-Western interpretations of the history of the church in general, but also just Western civilization.
I mean, yeah, even in college, and that's why like I think it's so important for you to be educated on this. And on, quite frankly, like I wish I was more educated on these things like the Inquisition, the Crusades, and all that, because and I feel like the medieval times in general, or the Dark Ages, as they say, are just kind of like passed over as something that's like nothing really happened during that period. That was so not a lot of people have a knowledge of like of the church's promotion of science, promotion of all these good ideas, and they almost just think of it as like an institution that's holding you back.
Yeah, but I almost see. I mean, I know it must be a modern thing, because you look at even going back into the 1800s, early 1900s, maybe up to the mid 20th century, you see great leaders in Europe. If they're trying to portray their leader well, he's portrayed as a crusader, right? That's seen as very. And now, I mean, I can almost see political cartoons like trying to denigrate the character of some European leader by making them look like they're this bloodthirsty, barbaric crusader. And we had this big shift. I blame a lot of things on Marxism and modernism, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, there's a lot of that. It's the trend, if you would call it a trend, sort of started actually as early as, say, Victorian era historians in the English-speaking world, because that's where this is a very predominant phenomena. And England, as you know, was Protestant and had been, and they actually, that's where you get these whole movements of English romanticism, where they romanticize aspects of the past, but they like to think of themselves as more developed and better. The theory of perpetual progress.
Right. Which we're still in the middle of, by the way. We, for some reason, think that everyone who was born 150 years ago are a bunch of backwards idiot barbarians. When I talk about this multiple times, but this is always my favorite example. I'm big into Civil War history, and a lot of it, I read a lot of these letters that these guys would write, and you'll read letters from some random Union soldier after the Battle of Chancellorsville, writing back home to his mom, and it sounds like beautiful, like the most beautiful, eloquent poetry you've ever heard. And he's talking about how gross it is that there's a bunch of dead bodies around where he's camping, right? And if anything, it seems like that idea that we have in our head of we keep marching forward and progress keeps marching forward. It seems to be sort of the opposite. We're dumbing ourselves down and staying on the while staying on the shoulders of giants and calling ourselves tall.
Yeah, and I mean, like, Victorian era and immediately before that, like 1700s, weren't exactly well known for their hygiene, for example.
Right.
But do you know what was a feature of like classical antiquity in the Middle Ages? Classical antiquity figured out running water,
Right.
Sewage, like rudimentary sewage systems, and in the Middle Ages and the classical antiquity, you have a just massive proliferation of public bathhouses.
Well, I was even reading about how in the 50s in the United States, you had something like a majority of Americans in most urban areas were attending operas and symphonies at least once a year.
Yeah.
Right? Compared to today. And the backslide has been really scary to me, right? And I think it's purposeful to some extent. We don't have to get down in that rabbit hole because we're running up on time. But
We are running up on time, and I hate to interrupt, but if you have questions that you would like us to talk about in another history episode, put that in the comment section down below, and we will try and get to them in another history episode, especially if there's a lot of interest.
And if you haven't
Let
subscribed,
us know, and make sure to subscribe.
and you do subscribe right after posting your question, Mickey will know and he will show up at your door and he will answer the question for you. All right, guys, we are going to run through some really quick questions. Y'all know how this works. Unless you're Mickey, pick one of those questions from Loaded Questions, and we're going to answer it. I'm going to go first. I just pulled mine out. What do you always do before going to school? Great question. Those of you who are just tuning in, this is made for like second graders. Every morning, I wake up and I bathe my beard. I do. I give my beard a bath every single morning. Got some beard wash. It's a major part of my day. It wakes me up. It's part of the routine.
What happens if you don't?
I don't know. I'm terrified to find out, so I always do.
There's stuff growing up?
Yeah. I
Bird's
think so.
nest?
Maybe. What have you got, Kyle?
What's one thing you would never want?
Ooh,
I think there's lots of things I would never want.
prostate cancer. Yeah.
I would, yeah, exactly. That'll be my answer. Prostate cancer.
You would
that would be
never-
really bad.
Would you ever want one of these episodes without me?
Exactly, yeah.
Yes,
I would never
That
want
is
to be
scary.
parted.
Stop.
Who would answer all the
I
questions?
want to have one with just Madeline, where I ask her really pressing questions about specific historical events. What you got, Mickey?
Let's see. What would you never want to be when you grow up?
What you got?
About like a stunt driver. Would you do that?
Yeah.
You could?
Let's see.
It's got to be something, anything, any career. The worst one.
U.S. politicians.
Yeah, that's good. Which probably
that's good.
qualifies you to be one, right? The fact that you don't want to be. All right, I like that, Madeline. What you
I
got?
like Mickey.
If you came across a treasure chest, what would you hope to find? All of the history books in the world.
Boom.
Oh, there you go. That's nice, Madeline. That'd be fun.
you. Thank you.
Mine is, what is your favorite thing to do at the beach? And me and my brothers, for as long as I can remember, have always like reenacted like Saving Private Ryan, where there's like one guy that like comes out of the surf, and he has to like get to like an umbrella or something like
Yeah.
that, and there's two guys that just try to tackle him.
That's
And
Have you ever tried recreating
Awesome.
the part of the Normandy landing scene where the guy's just carrying his arm that got blown off?
You should do that.
like mentally, yes, like I totally see like the top go down, and I hear the machine guns, but like no, I've
never just like
I'll add that into the repertoire.
like put your arm in your sleeve and carry around like a mannequin arm.
Yeah,
I could.
Put
It's a
it through that,
theater of the
Patrick. And
mind.
for legal reasons, I have to refer to you as Patrick at least one time per episode, so we can't get sued for pretending like you're actually Kane Brown. All right, Julian. Last but not least, what you got?
Okay, I'll go real quick. What is something that it would totally surprise you? And in the event that Pope Francis passes away, if the College of Cardinals were to elect Vladimir Putin as the next pope, that would totally
He's not eligible. He's not
surprise
Catholic.
me. Well, I mean,
I think they'll elect you,
exactly why
Julian.
You would elect me?
I think they ought to elect you. Yeah. And with that, we're going to be done because we're out of time.
We are.
Thanks, guys, for being here. Seriously, it was a great show. We need to do 20 more of these, really dig into the history of it. But right now, that's all the time we got. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Sam 1160 The Quest, Atlanta's Catholic Radio. Listen to Honest to God. This is Julian.
Signing off.
Over and out.